When the Son of Man cometh, shall he find faith on the earth?
Lord, I believe. Help thou mine unbelief.
May our testimonies be as deep and as strong as that of Jacob, who, when confronted by one who sought to destroy his faith, declared, I could not be shaken.
To meet the apostles in this second half is a glorious thing. We've been seeing them come and see. And then as Jesus has met with fishermen or seen tax collectors and others bringing friends and pointing people in his direction, we are now ready to name the 12 apostles. For this, we'll turn from Matthew 9 to Matthew 10, but let's get a little help from Luke and Mark along the way. They give us a few preliminary details that are really important. The way chapter 9 of Matthew ends, the harvest is great, but the laborers are few. So please pray for more laborers. And then you turn the page, and right as chapter 10 starts, and boom, here are the 12 apostles. But pause, slow it down with Luke and Mark's help. And notice what Luke adds, chapter 6, verse 12 and 13. It came to pass in those days that he, Jesus, went out into a mountain to pray. This is Christ ascending the mountain of the Lord. He trying to rise above the world below him and connect with a God above. He goes to a mountain to pray. He continued all night in prayer to God. His own Enos-like experience. But why? And when it was day, he called unto him his disciples, these followers, and of them he chose 12, whom also he named apostles. Why was Jesus spending all night in communion with his Father in heaven? Well, based on the context, because once the sun came up, he would raise apostles out of a multitude of disciples. And imagine how close to the Father he would want to be able to discern among the multitudes. You see the difference between a disciple and an apostle? A disciple is one who comes to learn. An apostle is one who is sent to teach. We have followers and we have leaders. We have hearers and we have teachers. We have those who come and those that are sent. Apostle just means one who is sent. And who can Jesus trust to send out and represent him to other multitudes? I'd say that's definitely worth a night of prayer. In the Mark version, you see this in chapter 3, verse 13 through 15. He goeth up into a mountain, same idea, and calleth unto him whom he would. And they came unto him. And he ordained 12, that they should be with him, and that he might send them forth to preach, and to have power to heal sicknesses, and to cast out devils. In other words, to do what Jesus himself had been doing. But did you catch those wonderful phrases? What are these apostles called to do? Two things that are really hard to do simultaneously. Number one, to be with me, and number two, to go from me, to go preach my word. I love that combination. And typically, the best leaders are the ones who had been to that point the best followers. The ones who want to stay with Jesus more than anything else in life. Oh yes, those are the ones you can afford to send out in his name. Because they'll want to come right back to him. And bringing sheaves upon their shoulders. Notice the other phrase, he calleth unto him whom he would. And that to me is a beautiful example of, it's the Lord's decision. And who does he call to be apostles? Whomever he would. I may have told you this story before, but when Heber J. Grant was a junior apostle, and there was a first vacancy in the quorum of the 12 that needed to be filled, and the other 14 men, first presidency in the quorum of the 12, came together to discuss names of people that they'd met in their worldwide ministries. Who is a possibility here? And young Heber J. Grant mentioned a friend of his that he knew would be an amazing church leader. Came from a strong family of leaders in the church, and thought he'd be an amazing apostle. And other apostles mentioned other possibilities, and as they discussed and as they prayed, ultimately it was the president of the church that had the final word. And it wasn't the person that Elder Grant suggested. But the next time there was a vacancy, he suggested the same name. And the next time, and the next time, and the next time, he kept bringing this up. Well, by the time the chief apostle was none other than Heber J. Grant, guess what? There was a time to fill another vacancy in the quorum. And everybody kind of knew who it was going to be, because it was the same name that Elder Grant had always brought up. Sure enough, as they're going around discussing things, he mentioned the name, and others mentioned other names, perhaps just feeling like, well, it's all academic at this point, but I might as well mention somebody. So at least it looks like there's other possibilities. Well, when it came time to pray after their time of discussion, the answer to that prayer came clearly and surprisingly to President Grant. That as wonderful as this friend of his was, that's not whom the Lord had called or chosen. To borrow the phrase here from the book of Mark, he calleth unto him whom he would. And he would call someone else. That apostle happened to be Melvin J. Ballard. And later, President Grant said, I've always known this is Christ's church and not mine. But that became even more crystal clear when I called practically a stranger to the Quorum of the 12 instead of my best lifelong friend. And yet through the Depression era, he relied upon the wisdom of Melvin J. Ballard probably more than anybody. The Lord made the call, not President Grant. And that's important for us to understand. Anytime a vacancy in the Quorum of the 12 is filled, the Lord calleth unto him whom he would. And it's from among disciples who more than anything wanted to be with Jesus and could therefore be trusted to be sent out by Jesus. Now Mark 6 adds a few more details regarding the apostles and their missions. In verse 7, he called unto him the 12 and began to send them forth by 2 and 2. Remember, Jewish law requires that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall every word be established. So now you have 6 companionships ready to go out in all the directions of the compass to go blaze abroad the good news. He sent them forth by 2 and 2 and gave them power over unclean spirits and commanded them that they should take nothing for their journey save a staff only, no scrip, no bread, no money in their purse. We'll see more of those instructions to the apostles once we turn to Matthew chapter 10. But here, let it suffice that he's calling them and sending them out. And then we get one more contextual element before their mission actually begins. For this, go to the beginning of Mark 6. Look at the first 2 verses. He went out from thence. He's been performing miracles to this point. He came into his own country, and his disciples follow him. And when the Sabbath day was come, he began to teach in the synagogue. And many hearing him were astonished, saying, From whence hath this man these things? I mean, certainly not from Nazareth, right? I mean, can any good thing come from that? Well, they ask, What wisdom is this which is given unto him, that even such mighty works are wrought by his hands? Now, this is either Mark's version of the story we saw more fully in Luke chapter 4, when Jesus is at the synagogue there in his hometown of Nazareth, and he takes the Isaiah scroll and reads a messianic prophecy and says, This day is this scripture fulfilled in your ears. And everyone's shocked and awe, like, what? How's this possible? This is either the same event, just given more sparsely in Mark's account, or perhaps it's a similar experience, that it happened at some different time period. But again, doubt in his own hometown. People wondering who he really is. You see, in verse 3 and 4, keep reading the same story in Mark 6, they say, Is not this the carpenter, or the craftsman, the son of Mary, the brother of James and Joseph and Judah and Simon? Are not his sisters here with us? And they were offended at him. How dare he think he's more than what we know him to be? But Jesus said unto them, Well, a prophet is not without honor, but in his own country, and among his own kin, and in his own house. Just like we saw in the account in Luke. But not just no prophet in his own country, but no prophet among his own kin, extended family. Well, these small towns are full of kin. Or even within his own house. It's like we're zeroing in on the people that know you best. And could they possibly believe that God might have a bigger plan for you than they did? I imagine that's something that apostles have to deal with too. Do people who know me best actually know me least as far as what God happens to see in me, as far as potential is concerned? That's what helps explain the next few verses, Mark 6, verse 5 through 7, that he, Jesus, could there do no mighty work, save that he laid his hands upon a few sick folk and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief. And he went round about the villages teaching, and he called unto him the 12, and then we're off and running with this ministry of the apostles. Now, again, all that beginning of Mark 6 by way of context. We saw Jesus go climb the mountain to spend the night in prayer, in preparation. We saw his own ministry of miracles and realizing it's all hands on deck. I can't do it all myself. But also here you put the ministry of the apostles in the context of doubt. And those closest to Jesus limiting him. That's ironic. There's actually a verse in the Psalms, it's a historical psalm that walks you through the Exodus story. And in the middle of it all, it says that they limited the Holy One of Israel. That's amazing. How does mortality limit omnipotence? Well, through our lack of faith. The fringe will always be there on Jesus' garment. His obedience is unfailing. But do we have the faith to reach out and connect to it? Faith precedes the miracles. He can always perform the miracles, but without our faith, there's no precedent, nothing to precede it. And to me, it's fascinating. We saw when the friends lowered down the man on the bed, the palsied man, remember this? And it says that Jesus saw their faith. He's marveling at it. Or when he spins around the centurion to show the Israelites, you get a load of this guy. He's amazing. Jesus marveling at faith, but here, marveling at unbelief. Oh, ye of little faith, how could you not see past what you thought you knew about me? Can you not see the hand of God? Well, this is Mark's account, like I said. It's in this context that the apostles are sent out to preach and to minister. Makes you wonder, did Jesus think that they would have success even in places that he didn't? Because we'd think, well, of course, they would never be able to do what Jesus can't do. Well, I don't know. On the one hand, no man is prophet in his own country, and so familiarity breeds contempt. And so, no, I don't believe in Jesus. But on the other hand, sometimes we need someone closer to us to connect with. Sometimes it's not the familiarity of Jesus. It's the distance of his divinity. Like, he's untouchable. It's like when some people say, what would Jesus do? And it's like, well, yeah, he would do this, but I'm not going to do that because I'm nothing like Jesus. Okay, then what would a mere mortal do? But how about an apostolic one? Someone a lot more like me, on my level at least, but making incredible decisions and choosing the right, whatever the cost. If, in the Book of Mormon, if Alma is too untouchable, then it's nice to have an Amulek, a homegrown Amulek. Really? He knows these things? And God's calling him, working through him? Wow, that's amazing. Maybe I'll take this thing seriously. I wonder if that is part of the calling of these 12 apostles as well. Jesus is the rock. He is the Redeemer. But if that rock seems too lofty, then maybe a little pebble like Peter will do. Someone a little more relatable. With that, let's go back to Matthew's version, though. Okay, chapter 9 ended with the harvest great, laborers are few. We got to change that. So pray for more laborers. Then chapter 10 begins, and here's the calling of the 12 apostles. Chapter 10, verse 1, when he had called unto him his 12 disciples, they're called disciples here, but we know them as the apostles, he gave them power against unclean spirits to cast them out, to heal all manner of sickness, all manner of disease. Again, exactly the kinds of things that Jesus had been doing for the last 2 chapters in Matthew. In Luke's account, we get this version, chapter 9, verse 1 and 2. Then he called his 12 disciples together and gave them power and authority over all devils and to cure diseases. So it's not just that they had power, they had authority too. And that's going to be an important aspect. He goes on, he sent them to preach the kingdom of God and to heal the sick. So there's going to be teaching, preaching, healing among them too. And remember, at first they're just disciples. But of them I can make apostles. And how many? 12. Why? Because there's 12 tribes of Israel, and I want everyone to see themselves in these great servants of God. They represent you, and I'm teaching them so that they can teach you. The story then continues, chapter 10, verse 2 through 4. We're back to Matthew's account. And we'll stay here for the remainder of this week's lesson by and large, because this is the longest, deepest, most detailed account of the kind of instruction that Jesus gives his 12 apostles before he sends them forth. Now let's get their names down first. Matthew 10, 2 through 4. Now the names of the 12 apostles are these. The first, Simon, who is called Peter. And we're going to see more and more that Simon stands out as the chief apostle. He's first on the list for a reason. Yes, Jesus renames him Peter, but there's still a lot of Simon in him that he needs to overcome. He's not quite rock-like yet, but we'll get there. Just imagine what happens to a person when they give Jesus free rein, okay? Second, he says, and Andrew, his brother, then James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother. We're kind of starting to see pairs already. Two brothers, Simon and Andrew. Two brothers, James and John. In the Mark account of this, by the way, they're given their nickname. It says he surnamed them Boanerges, which is the sons of thunder. Another awesome nickname. If Simon gets to be the rock, then James and John, I got nicknames from my whole first presidency here. The sons of thunder on either side of the rock. Not bad. We're going to see a little bit later that nickname may have been appropriate in more ways than one, for both good and not so good. But anyway, now we have 4 apostles. Now for the other 8, those are the 3 we know best. Add in Andrew as part of the family, but then the 8 beyond that. Philip and Bartholomew. Now, Bartholomew is mentioned in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It's Nathanael that's mentioned in the book of John. Remember back when we studied John chapter 1, and Philip finds Nathanael and says, man, you got to see this guy. You got to meet him. What? Anything good thing out of Nazareth? How could that? Nathanael, the Israelite in whom there is no guile. Well, yeah, that's Bartholomew. Same guy. Next pair. Thomas. We'll call him Doubting Thomas, but he has so many other redeeming qualities that we need to wrestle with and honor him for before the doubt sets in. Along with Thomas, Matthew the publican, and you can picture him rolling his eyes like, yeah, you got to bring that up again, don't you? Yes, I'm the publican, not anymore. Next, James the son of Alphaeus. In the chosen, this is the one they refer to as little James. And the scriptures do try to differentiate where possible the 2 Jameses that are in the quorum. Next, Lebbaeus, whose surname was Thaddeus. And this one's tricky because who is this? Is it Thaddeus? Is it Lebbaeus? Sometimes he's even called Judas the Greater or Judas the Zealot or Judas, quote, not Iscariot, unquote. Yeah, if my name was Judas and I was in the quorum of the 12, I would want everyone to know. I'm not that one, though. I'm a different one, okay? Judas comes from Judah. It's the house of Israel. It's the tribe of Judah, the Jews. So it's a very common name, okay? Then 2 more. Simon the Canaanite. And Canaanite's a bad translation. A better translation for that word is a zealot. And again, a zealot is... Zealot in the Hebrew is close to the word for Canaanite, so that's the confusion that the King James translators had. But he's a zealot, and then the one that we know also, sadly, for his... he's not just famous, he's infamous. And Judas Iscariot. And then Matthew had to include, he's obviously writing after the fact, he included the phrase, who also betrayed him. Luke added another phrase. When he lists them all, it mentions Judas Iscariot and calls him the traitor. Yikes. We'll wait to see that for another almost 3 years. But in the meantime, these are all amazing disciples who want to be with Jesus. Called as incredible apostles, sent out by Jesus with the same power and authority that he has to do what he would do. Not all people are close enough to stretch out their faith and touch the hem of Christ's garment. So let me send out people clothed with my authority and power to reach them themselves. In this group we see brothers, two sets. We see friends, Philip and Bartholomew or Nathaniel. We see opposites. One Simon who was a zealot. I would do anything to destroy Rome. And then you get Matthew, who found himself willing to work for Rome and collecting taxes on their behalf from his own people. Those two would have had an interesting time together in the Quorum of the 12. Did he make them sit together? Maybe. Serve together? Perhaps. In some ways, the Lord needs different backgrounds and different perspectives. If truth is made manifest by proving contraries, then to me it's beautiful that in the original Quorum of the 12, there are contraries to be proven. People on different sides of the political aisle. And the same is true in the Quorum of the 12 currently. I'm grateful they're not all just yes men. These are alpha dogs, every one of them. They're used to leading things themselves, and then put them all together in the same quorum and figure it out. Reach unanimity in ascertaining the will of God. Man, that's a tall order. But I wouldn't trust it to any other group than these faithful, diligent disciples that God has called as his apostles. It's a powerful thing. So Simon, Matthew, figure it out. If we're going to try to set up the kingdom of God in the midst of the Roman Empire and somehow navigate that, I need opposite opinions on this. So speak up and speak your mind, and we'll figure it out from there. That's exactly what happens. One of the things President Nelson has said, we know we finally reached the will of God when we finally reach unanimity. In fact, when my students have sometimes asked, how do you place faith in fallibility? How do you trust prophets when you know, because they don't claim, you know they're not infallible, because they don't claim to be? That's my answer. Unanimity helps offset fallibility, especially when they're coming from opposite angles on things and needing to come together. And they do. It's amazing. Well, what kind of instruction will he give them? This is where the rest of chapter 10 unfolds. Matthew 10, verse 5 and 6. Right off the bat, once we know their names, these 12 Jesus sent forth and commanded them, saying, go not into the way of the Gentiles, and into any city of the Samaritans enter ye not, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Interesting that even before he tells them where to go, he tells them where not to go. That seems kind of exclusionary. Well, this is coming from Jesus, who constantly seems to break his own rule and blesses Canaanites and talks to the Samaritan woman and preaches in the Decapolis and heals a demoniac among swine herds. I mean, yeah, that's Jesus, okay? But for you, let me tell you where we're going to start. It will grow from there, but trust me with your marching orders, even when I seem to be limiting where it is I want you to serve. Don't worry. It's a house of order, and we will grow from here. But start with the lost sheep of the house of Israel. They are sheep without a shepherd. I'm the good shepherd. You're my under shepherds. Please help the flock. Okay? Then verse 7 and 8. As you go, preach. So everywhere you're headed, keep the mouth open. Look for opportunities to serve. And this is what you'll preach. Saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. It's right here. I know him. I've seen the good news and the glad tidings up close and personal. Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out devils. That's about as quick a summary of the miracles we just saw Jesus perform as you'll get. Heal the sick, oh yeah, centurion servant, leper, man of the palsy, you name it. Cleanse the lepers, oh, check that one, did that one too. Raise the dead, oh yes, daughter of Jairus, son of the widow of Nain. Cast out devils, how about a legion's worth? Oh, you mean you want us to do what we thought only you could do? Yes, exactly. And then the Savior explains, freely ye have received, freely give. Why do you think I set the example for you? Were you not paying attention? I remember when I turned 16, it was my first time to bless the sacrament. I was like, I've been sitting right in front of them for like 4 years just to pass the sacrament or to prepare it. I have no idea what they do. Why was I not paying attention? Or the first time I was in a bishopric and had to conduct sacrament meeting, I'm like, I've been watching this my whole life. and I feel completely lost on how to do this myself. I've been your mentor. I've been teaching. I've been showing you the kingdom. You have received, and you received it freely. Now go out and give it freely as well. But now that you mention it, Jesus, there is one thing I'm a little worried about. If we're freely giving and freely receiving, what about the things that aren't exactly free? How are we going to pay our expenses on this mission? Well, look at verse 9 and 10. Provide neither gold, nor silver, nor brass in your purses. In fact, you won't even need a purse. Nor scrip for your journey. And a scrip is some kind of traveling bag. Picture a suitcase, picture a backpack. Nope, you're not going to need any of that either. There's not going to be anything in it, so you don't need it either. Neither 2 coats. One will be more than enough. Again, if somebody comes and takes your coat, you were going to give them your cloak anyway. So that would be the only reason to have 2, so you have 2 to give away. But no, don't need that. Neither shoes, nor yet staves. And you can picture them like, huh? What? Seriously? And it's like, what's the packing list? And they kind of have it mapped out in their mind. And the Lord keeps crossing things out like, nope, won't need that, won't need that, won't need that. And then he explains, for the workman is worthy of his meat. Wait a minute. So there will be meat? I mean, we're working and we're earning some kind of wage? Well, not the way you're thinking. But meat, yes, you have to eat. I get that. Just don't feed yourself. Let other people do it. Learn to trust in the goodness of others, because that's what we'll have to appeal to. We're looking for people of faith. We're looking for people of sacrifice, of goodness and generosity. In some ways, by throwing yourself on their mercy, they will self-identify as the elect, as the ones prepared to receive you. They'll receive because they're willing to give. They're the ones that will feed you. It's a fascinating approach. And in the early days of the church, it was that way too. Go forth as missionaries without purse or scrip. Don't bring extra money. Don't bring any extra baggage. In fact, the irony there of not needing a purse, isn't a purse or a wallet, doesn't that suggest that you've got more money than you're spending, and so you kind of just need a place to keep it? And some kind of bag, suitcase, backpack suggests you have stuff that you're not actually wearing or using in the moment, so I just need a place to store it. No, what was the line in the Lord's Prayer? Give us this day, how much? Just our daily bread. I don't need an extra purse or an extra wallet or an extra bag for that. I'm eating on the go, on the run. Which means tomorrow I'll have to hope that there's more manna outside my tent. But God always seems to come through. There's something about going forth without enough flesh on your arm to place your trust there. That to me is amazing. There's something about having the faith to live on less than what's required, because what's going to fill in the gap? It's going to have to be the blessings of God. So financially we don't do that much anymore. But maybe that's the reason God sends us out to foreign countries or other areas or a language you don't know or people that you've never talked to and companions you didn't choose, because man, it strips away the flesh on your arm. It's interesting that there are still ways that we are living this because we're not fully prepared to do everything that God expects of us. It's fascinating. Keep reading though, in verse 11 through 13. And into whatsoever city or town ye shall enter, inquire who in it is worthy. I mean, again, you're going to need to know who will self-distinguish as places and people that you can stay or that you can receive from. So inquire who is worthy, and there abide till ye go thence. That's where you're going to stay. When you come into an house, salute it. And if the house be worthy, let your peace come upon it. But if it be not worthy, let your peace return to you. You're just kind of, knocking on a door, giving someone the opportunity to let you know if they're worthy of your message or not. That sounds a lot like tracting to me, to be honest. And there we are inquiring who is worthy, who is open-minded, who has a humble heart, who is in a preparation to receive the word. And if they are, then abide with them. You are sending out peace in every direction. Who will open their door to receive it? Versus who slams the door and that peace bounces right back to us. Now there's a more bold way of doing that in the next two verses, 14 and 15. Whosoever shall not receive you, nor hear your words, when ye depart out of that house or city, shake off the dust of your feet. Luke adds that that would be a testimony against them. And then back to Matthew. Verily I say unto you, it shall be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city. Wow, this is serious business. I wouldn't suggest that we take this literally in terms of passing some sort of final judgment like, okay, it's on you and look out for fire and brimstone from heaven. Hope you meet your neighbors from Sodom and Gomorrah someday. No, that's not judgment we pass. But in terms of shaking off the dust of our feet, metaphorically, to suggest that I have done, this is in some ways what Jacob does in the Book of Mormon, where he shakes his garments before the people, saying, I am now clean of your blood, because I've done my work. This is back to the book of Ezekiel, that as long as the watchman on the tower raises the warning voice, then the ball's in the court of his hearers. Will you do something about it? Will you take my message seriously? Otherwise, I'm not responsible. I did what I was asked to do. So to shake the garments, to wash the hands, we'll see Pilate do that in the wrong way later. But here in some ways, I have to wash my feet of you because you wouldn't let us in to wash your feet of the earthly dirt that is contaminating you. So I can have nothing to do. I need to be free from the blood and sins of this generation. Or in this case, the dirt that I've picked up in my wanderings through the wicked world. Now in verse 16, the Lord sums it all up to this point. Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Wait a minute, I thought we were going to be the under-shepherds. Well, yeah, you are. Wolves don't like shepherds either. But they certainly prey on the sheep, and it will feel like they're preying on you. But that's what I'm sending you out to do. You'll be persecuted. Prepare. Be therefore, and this is a famous phrase, wise as serpents and harmless as doves. What an interesting contrary to prove. You see, if we're only wise as serpents, that wisdom might tend toward manipulation. Meanwhile, if we're only harmless as doves, that harmlessness might inch towards naivete. But if we can combine the two, and that's what contraries are, this paradox that somehow we force these two to coexist, and I'm going to be as wise as a serpent. I'm going to be sophisticated, trying to think of creative ways to slither into places that I don't seem to be able to enter. Can we do that through social media? Can we do it through Facebook? How are we going to preach the gospel during COVID? What are we going to do to get into this gated community or to cross borders of countries that don't want us in yet? How to see the entry of the gospel into beyond the Iron Curtain or into the former Soviet Union. The apostles themselves had to be wise as serpents. But through the entire process, they were harmless as doves. They were extending the olive leaf, symbols of peace, as representatives of the Prince of Peace. That's hard to do. It's tough. And I remember teaching one sweet lady on my mission who was on fire, recent convert, loved the gospel. Her husband, she just didn't have the patience for her husband to come along at his pace. And she was constantly cracking the spiritual whip, like, come on, why haven't you joined the church yet, honey? And he's like, I just don't understand the Book of Mormon yet. And she's like, why, who cares? It's true, dang it, just join the church. And he was the type that I have to understand everything. And when we met him and her, we realized he was more open to the possibility than we thought. But in some ways, in her overzealousness, she was scaring him off rather than inviting him in. So realizing that one of her worst enemies was herself, she just didn't realize it, we actually asked, hey, sister, can we come over on a P day or sometime? And or we study the missionary guide, how to be missionaries. We do it like every day. Can we do it with you one of these days? Wouldn't that be cool? And you're a convert. You didn't get to go on a mission. You never went to the MTC. You want to learn the method to the madness, how we are missionaries? And she's all, that would be amazing. We're like, good, because you need it. And then we went and we taught her some missionary principles about how to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And her comment was so hilarious as we're explaining things like, we need to be patient with people when they have questions. I mean, we're thinking about her husband. We didn't say it, but we hope that she figured it out along the way. That sometimes we just need to let them go at their own pace and this and that. It was amazing. And at one point she just looked at us and said, ser misionero, hay que ser suave. In other words, to be a missionary, you got to be smooth. I don't know if I'd ever been called suave before. But to be a smooth missionary, not smooth in terms of slippery and oily and trying to sneak our way in. No, but smooth like a wise serpent and yet a harmless dove. Yes, we need to be simple but sophisticated. Wise and innocent. We need to prove that set of contraries. And the apostles, more than anybody, have to do just that. The next few verses, he says, but beware of men, and by beware, it's be careful. Here is another contrary. You got to be trusting, but don't be gullible, okay? It's like the JST of Matthew chapter 7, be about judging. Judge not unrighteously, but do judge righteous judgment. You're going to have to do that. So beware of men, for they will deliver you up to the councils. They will scourge you in their synagogues. You shall be brought before governors and kings for my sake. Whoa, you picture a bunch of poor fishermen, people that have never left the land around the Sea of Galilee, except maybe for a trip down to Jerusalem every so often for feast days and festivals. And whoa, I'm going to go face governors and kings? I'm way out of my depth. Don't worry. He goes on, do that for a testimony against them and the Gentiles. But when they deliver you up, take no thought how or what ye shall speak. For it shall be given you in that same hour what ye shall speak. For it is not ye that speak, but the Spirit of your Father which speaketh in you. Now, honestly, of all the blessings, promises that God makes to his servants, that's the one I doubted most before my mission and believed most strongly by the time I was done. The take no thought beforehand. The open your mouth and it shall be filled. Because that happened to me on my mission so many times. Where people would ask me a question I'd never heard of before, and it was like, here goes nothing, and I open my mouth and find myself saying things I didn't know. But it was exactly what the person needed to hear. And without that, I would not have had the courage to go do Q&A in other church congregations. I don't know. Open my mouth, the only thing it gets filled with is my foot. No, I'd had enough experiences to know that that's the case. It's a promise that he makes throughout the dispensations. How about this version in Doctrine and Covenants 84:85? Neither take ye thought beforehand what ye shall say, but treasure up in your minds continually the words of life. And it shall be given you in the very hour that portion that shall be meted unto every man. So it's not just, oh, don't think about it. Remember when we talked about this at the end of, Matthew chapter 6? Of take no thought and take no thought and take no thought. It kept getting repeated, but the idea there was don't overthink it. Don't get over anxious. Don't worry about things. Prepare, yes, but don't freak out about it. And you get that sense in this Doctrine and Covenants version. It's not just don't think about what you're going to say. It's don't stress about it, because if you've already treasured up continually the words of life, it's in there somewhere. You've done your homework. You've given the Lord something to draw out of you. And that's typically the case. So take no thought. Well, don't overthink. But you've followed me. Have you been paying attention? Have you been learning the good news? So you can go out and do what I have done. After all, if you overthink it, chances are the words you say will be your words. And what those people need to hear, whether it's in the council or the synagogue or the kings or the governors themselves, they need to know what God would have them hear. And for that, it's not your prior preparation. It's your worthiness to receive the revelation and inspiration of God. My dad was a patriarch, and often he'd say, it's sometimes even harder to give patriarchal blessings to people you know, because you think you know them well enough to know what they need to hear. Whereas a perfect stranger coming in, it's like, okay, I got nothing. So what is going to be given them, it's not going to be me that speaks. It's going to be the Spirit of my Father that speaketh in me. Because only God knows them. I don't. Well, we better get around ourselves somehow. We better get over ourselves and past ourselves and through ourselves so that God can speak through us. And we know that this is a message that God would have you hear. Because I didn't know what I was going to say to you. That's powerful. He then says in verse 21 to 23, and the brother shall deliver up the brother to death, and the father the child, and the children shall rise up against their parents and cause them to be put to death. Sounds scary. Brother to brother, parent to child? Are you serious? This is the complete disintegration of social ties, a tearing up of the fabric of the family. It sounds a little like modern times, to be honest. And it's only the gospel of Jesus Christ that can fix things. So what does he say? Ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake. Don't forget that beatitude that mentions something similar, right? You're in good company, so persecuted they the prophets that were before you. Yes, you'll be hated. But he that endureth to the end shall be saved. When they persecute you in this city, flee ye into another. For verily I say unto you, ye shall not have gone over the cities of Israel till the Son of Man be come. And what he means by that is, don't just sit around and wait for everything to change. Move on to the next spot. Because you're barely going to have enough time to cover everybody or everywhere the first go around before the Son of Man, before that timing is come. You get the sense of urgency here in terms of missionary work, of spreading the gospel because the clock is ticking. And the longer we procrastinate, the worse the world gets. We want the Savior to come and come quickly. So let's get moving. And if you're persecuted or cast out one spot, fine, go somewhere else. In fact, stronger word, flee somewhere else. Oh, sounds like somebody's chasing me. Yeah, you think? Keep going. Can you imagine as this is dawning on the apostles, like, what did we sign up for? Are you serious? We just kind of wanted to follow you around and watch you do all this amazing stuff, not us to do it. We were scared enough of the persecution you were facing, but for us to face it too? Can I do this? Am I ready? Now, in some ways, why would we think it would be easy for us when it was anything but easy for Jesus? So in verse 24 and 25, the disciple is not above his master, nor the servant above his Lord. It is enough for the disciple that he be as his master and the servant as his Lord. And that kind of includes some rough stuff. He said, if they have called the master of the house Beelzebub, how much more shall they call them of his household? If Jesus has been called all kinds of things, if he's rejected, persecuted, if he's going to end up being crucified, then who do we think we are to think that we're above that? It's fascinating how early on in the Doctrine and Covenants, as early as section 5, if I remember correctly, the Lord says to Joseph Smith, hey, Joseph, don't worry about what kinds of persecution you'll face, because they can't do anything worse to you than what they did to me. And I picture poor Joseph going, they killed you. What do you mean they can't do anything worse to me? Is that supposed to make me feel better? And the Lord like, well, yeah, they did kill me, but I got better. I was resurrected. You will be too. Just follow. Wow. Follow anywhere. Okay, this is what I signed up for. As someone once asked Elder Holland, how come apostles today don't give their lives for the gospel like they did in the ancient world? What they meant was, why aren't they killed? But the way they said it, why don't you give your lives? And Elder Holland's response, I thought that's what I was doing. That's exactly what they're doing. The only way out of the apostleship is death. I'll talk about enduring to the end. Talk about not being above their master. And if Christ will teach, preach, heal to the bitter end, then so will they. It's amazing. He then goes on and says, verse 26 and 27. Fear them not, therefore, for there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, and hid that shall not be known. What I tell you in darkness, that speak ye in light, and what ye hear in the ear, that preach ye upon the housetops. Oh, I'll be whispering in your ear. Go shout it from the mountaintop. Spread the word. What you see in me, then show to others. What I tell you behind closed doors, go let those truths find the light of day. There's work to be done. In verse 28 through 31, fear not them which kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul. But rather fear him which is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. Again, this is like those Joseph Smith lines, like, I'm not sure how reassuring this is. What am I signing up for? Well, you're signing up to follow me, wherever that leads. Jesus goes on, art not 2 sparrows sold for a farthing, and one of them shall not fall on the ground without your Father? Oh, the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear ye not, therefore, ye are of more value than many sparrows. Yes, it's going to get that bad for you. And if you read books like Fox's Book of Martyrs, you read the stories of the martyrdoms of these incredible men, with beheadings and boiling oil and crucifixion upside down. Read the book of Hebrews chapter 11 and you see some sawn asunder. I mean, it's intense what people endure because of their faith in Jesus. But it's faith in Jesus that they had and propelled them forward. They knew that he valued them more than many sparrows. So whether in life or in death, I will bring people to Christ. On my own mission, I had just been called by my president to serve alongside him, and it was our very first set of zone conferences, serving in the office. I was so overwhelmed. I had no idea what I was doing. And in the middle of zone conference, we had I think 12 zones, and 3 of them would come together and we'd have 4 different zone conferences around the island. And this was the very first one, first time I'd ever been part of this leadership team. And right in the middle of it, my mission president got a frantic phone call and one of the newer missionaries on the south side of the island had just been killed in a car accident. And his companion had no idea what to do, and I just remember being called into some outside classroom as the rest of the zone conference was going on, and my mission president and the other assistant and myself, and we're just powwowing, like, what do we do? And I'm like, I don't know how to do anything. And my mission president turned to my senior companion, the other assistant, and said, come with me. We're driving there right now to try to figure out what we should do. And then he turned to me and said, Elder Halverson, take care of the rest of zone conference. And I'm like, sí, Presidente. And I'm like, what? And then the mission president came in, explained to all those 3 zones assembled what had just happened, and then jumped in the car with my companion and took off. And 3 zones worth of shell-shocked missionaries, knowing that one of their partners in arms had just died in the mission field. And now I'm in charge of the meeting. I had no idea what else to do. So I just said to the other elders and sisters, we are going to have a testimony meeting and end our zone conference from there. Well, I was blown away by that testimony meeting. None of the missionaries there actually knew the elder who'd been killed in the car accident, because he was a greenie and hadn't been transferred around to other zones. I had met him on a trade-off about a week or 2 earlier and was so impressed by his excitement, his passion, his urgency. He was going to be an incredible missionary. Actually, he already was. And it was amazing to me to see, just with the announcement of his passing, the effect it had on missionaries that never knew him. As they realized that this mission was not a right, let alone a mere rite of passage. It was a privilege, it was a gift, and one that could be taken at any instant. And that set of missionaries promised, I'm going to be different. I want to sew up my bag. I don't want to go through the motions. I want to make every minute count of my mission. After that conference ended and I caught back up with my companion and my mission president, I explained what had happened and how powerful it was. And then the next set of Zoom conferences that we had, which was in the area where this missionary had died, and so everybody knew him, we had a similar experience with another round of testimony meetings. We went to the third set of Zoom conferences and did the same thing, and the fourth and did the same thing. And I felt by the time it was done, and I'd heard the missionaries all across our island infused with zeal to preach the gospel with all the power and conviction they could because of the sacrifice of this missionary. I ended up writing a letter to his parents and explained to them, I'm the only missionary in this mission that got to hear the testimonies of the entire island. Because my mission president and companion went to the other three but weren't there for the first, I just felt like I needed to tell you, mother and father, that if a missionary's purpose is to bring souls unto Christ, then not only did your son do that in the brief time he preached the gospel in Puerto Rico, but he did it in the moment of his passing. That in both life and in death, he brought souls unto Christ, and by bringing missionaries unto Christ, with a renewed zeal to go out and make a difference in the lives of those around us, your son's sacrifice was profound and will be profoundly influential. I felt the need to testify of that, having heard all those testimonies. And I knew and still know it was true. To think about what these apostles are realizing, not a hair of my head, worth many sparrows. Whom the Lord calls, he qualifies. God expects great things of me, but where much is expected, much is required, much is also given. Reverse that, the order of that verse. And God will be with me. He was and is. The Lord goes on and says in verse 32, whosoever therefore shall confess me before men, him will I confess also before my Father which is in heaven. But whosoever shall deny me before men, him will I also deny before my Father which is in heaven. Sounds a lot like that earlier warning at the end of the Sermon on the Mount. I never knew you, and you never knew me. You didn't confess me, I can't confess you. You denied me, I must deny you. There's no relationship here. There's no covenant. And why would we act like we didn't know him? Notice this from the Luke version of all of this. This is Luke 9:26. For whosoever shall be ashamed of me and of my words, of him shall the Son of Man be ashamed when he shall come in his own glory and in his Father's and of the holy angels. That's stronger language. It's shame. And is that what is keeping us from bearing witness of Jesus Christ? Is it shame? Is it fear of what people will think? Oh, the Lord is trying to wean us off the arm of flesh and the fear of other flesh. How does Paul say it? I am not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's the power of God unto salvation. What's there to be ashamed of? What's there to fear? In verse 34 through 36, Jesus says, think not that I am come to send peace on the earth. Now that's shocking. Wait a minute. I thought you were the Prince of Peace. I thought that's what you were coming to bring. Well, eventually, yes. In the long term, yes. But in the short term, no. He says, I came not to send peace, but a sword. For I am come to set a man at variance against his father, and the daughter against her mother, and the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. Yes, a man's foes shall be they of his own household. How's that for the stark demands of discipleship? Variance in your own household? I guess in some ways the question is, to whom will you be most loyal? President Hinckley talked about the loneliness of leadership and to find your companionship in Christ, no matter what kind of social fallout there is for following him. In verse 37 through 39, Jesus goes on, he that loveth father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. He that loveth son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. This repetition of more than me, you see, it's all about comparison. It's all relative. Where are our priorities? Who do we love most? Jesus goes on, he that taketh not his cross. And how's that for a word with incredible foreshadowing? If you don't take your cross and follow after me, you're not worthy of me. And then this powerful summary of what he's been teaching so far. He that findeth his life shall lose it, and he that loseth his life for my sake shall find it. So in a phrase, my dear brethren, my 12 apostles, go get lost. And you'll find yourself. You'll find life eternal. You'll find life in its abundance. Even if it's cut short by persecution, you'll find eternal life on the other side. Lose yourself in service to others. I actually love that phrase. If you want to find your life, then lose it. I even thought about making t-shirts at one point that just say, get lost. And if people were offended by that, then I could explain what it means. Go lose yourself in order to truly find yourself. In fact, that was in the back of my mind one year when my wife and kids and I were going to a family reunion at a time when almost all of my siblings had young children, same with mine, and a bunch of babies and toddlers under the same roof, and realizing, oh no, if one baby wakes up in the middle of the night, it's going to go dominoes. And there's going to be a crying baby in every bedroom, and every family is going to be exhausted by the next morning. This could be a disaster of a family reunion. But again, because I've been thinking, pondering about this concept of getting lost, I made that my own personal motto for the family reunion. I don't even think my family knows about this, but I told my wife, okay, here's our plan. It's get lost week. And if somebody needs some extra help, if one of the nephews or nieces needs supervision so that the parents can go out and have some fun, then that's us. Because we're going to lose ourselves. Otherwise, we'll lose our minds. And there were times during that year's family reunion where I remember a couple times my wife would say, oh, you know what, so-and-so could really use your help. And are you okay? And she was like tiptoeing on the invitation. I'm like, of course I'm going to do that. Because I'm lost. And I'm about to get lost. So, see ya. And I'd go, and honestly, it was one of the best family reunions I've ever been on. Because it was never about me. And in losing myself in service, I found such a better experience than I otherwise would. What makes discipleship less than what it could be is we're too focused on ourselves. And if we'll just lose ourselves in service to others, you'll be amazed at who you find in the mirror when all is said and done. It's beautiful. A few last verses. 40 and 41. He that receiveth you receiveth me. And he that receiveth me receiveth him that sent me. Sounds a lot like the oath and covenant of the priesthood in the Doctrine and Covenants, section 84. You receive my servants, you receive me. You receive me, you receive my Father. Receive my Father, receive all that the Father hath. That's what he wants to give to you. Oh, no purse nor scrip, because no purse can contain the riches of eternity I'm trying to give you. No scrip can hold the blessings of God I'm trying to pour out as I open the windows of heaven. Just come and serve. And those that receive you will receive me and all that the Father and the Son have to offer. And then he says something that has always confused me until I thought about it long enough for it to actually make sense. And once it makes sense, it's a powerful insight. Verse 41, he that receiveth a prophet in the name of a prophet shall receive a prophet's reward. You see, he's been talking about receiving. Are you receiving me? Are you receiving the Father? Well, how are you receiving prophets? If you receive them in the name of a prophet, you'll receive a prophet's reward. Meanwhile, here's another alternative. He that receiveth a righteous man in the name of a righteous man shall receive a righteous man's reward. Now, like I said, I had no idea what that meant the first, 30, 40 years I read that. What? Okay, receive a prophet, like a prophet. Is prophets right? And then it hit me, how do you view servants of God? When you look at the first presidency and the Quorum of the 12, or back to Jesus' day, when you see Simon, what do you see? A fisherman or a fisher of men? What do you see when you look at Matthew? A tax collector? Or someone who is collecting, gathering souls? What do you see? In our day, are they just nice old men? Or are they prophets and apostles? Prophets, seers, and revelators? Because the two choices here, is this a prophet or merely a righteous man? How we perceive them and how we accept them will determine the kinds of blessings that flow when we follow them. If they're just nice old men, then what is a nice old man's reward? If I accept a nice old man in the name of a nice old man, then I'll get whatever a nice old man can give me. A little pat on the head, a Werther's Original, I don't know. Meanwhile, if they're prophets, and I accept them as prophets with that title in the name of a prophet, what kind of reward comes for following prophets of God? Oh, now we're back to the oath and covenant. I receive them. I'm receiving the Son. I'm receiving the Father. I'm receiving all the Father has. Whoa. My perception of these servants of God makes all the difference. What is the church? Is it just some kind of mortal social organization? Or is it the kingdom of God upon the earth? What is discipleship? Is it just doing a good deed daily? Or is it life in Christ and self-sacrifice to bring souls unto Him? What's the quorum of the 12? Is this a board of directors trying to navigate social currents and figure out how our organization is supposed to go? Or are they prophets, seers, and revelators with the power and authority of Christ? What are we doing here, my friends? Seriously. Is this ancient literature we've been studying, or is this the word of Almighty God? Are we passing time? Or are we preparing the earth for the second coming of Christ? How you perceive these apostles will determine everything in terms of whether or not you follow them and what kind of reward you will or will not receive. I'm fascinated by that verse. It is powerful. Again, it makes me wonder, what's my perception? Now, even if you can't accept all that, if you're still torn between prophets of God or righteous men, then the Lord's final verse here, verse 42, is interesting. Can you at least accept their discipleship and what they're trying to accomplish, even if you don't give them the authority that the Lord has, or at least honor that authority? Because notice this, verse 42, whosoever shall give to drink unto one of these little ones a cup of cold water only in the name of a disciple, oh, verily I say unto you, he shall in no wise lose his reward. In God's incredible generosity, He's even offering rewards for those that don't totally see who's before them. Oh, just some little one, the least of these. Thirsty, I don't know why they didn't have the clue to bring person script and stuff to eat and stuff to drink. Why are they asking me for it? Well, because I'm trying to find the worthy and the righteous. Is that you? I'm trying to see those that will honor discipleship with discipleship of their own, that will recognize needs and have a soft enough heart to want to meet them, even just a drink of water. And God will reward you abundantly with living water of His own. That's what I've been trying to offer you. A well springing up into everlasting life. If you don't recognize that, that's okay. I won't force feed you living water. But can you give me a temporal cup out of which to drink? I loved those experiences in the mission field, just relying on the goodness of people. And typically even those that didn't want to hear my message were more than happy to offer me a cup of water. I'm grateful for that. As we conclude this week's lesson, can we just rush back to Luke chapter 9 for just a few afterthoughts? Because when all is said and done and these apostles have received these marching orders, in Luke's version of it all, Luke chapter 9 verse 6, they departed and went through the towns, preaching the gospel and healing everywhere. So teaching, preaching, healing for them too. Everywhere the apostles preach, they heal. Everywhere they heal, they preach. It's all the same to them. And then later in that same chapter, chapter 9 of Luke, we find Luke's version of what we saw last week elsewhere about foxes having holes and birds having nests, but the Son of Man not having where to lay his head. I guess that was 2 weeks ago. We see Luke's version of the dead burying the dead. And then of those two examples of discipleship, that great self-sacrifice, we then find a third. And in Luke chapter 9, verse 61 and 62, we read, "And another also said, Lord, I will follow thee. But let me first go bid them farewell, which are at home at my house." Now, remember, Jesus was pretty stark about, oh, you want to be homeless, then come follow me. Oh, go let the dead bury their dead, just follow me. What's he going to say to this person that all they want to do is go back and say goodbye? Oh, do you not understand the demands of discipleship? Jesus said unto him, "No man having put his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom of God." Wow. Priorities indeed. Putting God first above all other things. Seeking first the kingdom, trusting that everything else will be added unto you. To understand what the Lord expects of those that he calls, it makes me all the more amazed. Not just in the goodness of God in calling prophets and apostles, but the goodness of mere mortals to accept that call to begin with. I've shared before the story of Richard G. Scott, when he was working for the U.S. Navy on trying to create a nuclear navy for the United States military. And when he was called to be a mission president in South America, and he went to the admiral of the Navy, who was famous for being tough as nails, and said, "I'm going to have to leave the Navy for 3 years to go serve as a mission president for my church." The admiral was so angry, he accused young Richard Scott of being a traitor to his country. The Soviets are going to catch up and pass us if you leave. It was like the whole weight of the Cold War was on Rick Scott's shoulders. The admiral even said to him, "If this is what Mormons do, then I don't want any Mormons in the Navy. If you leave, you're never coming back. You'll never get another job in this field. In fact, get rid of the rest of the people in your church if they'll put God above country." Wow. Now he's really starting to worry. Are other people going to be put in a bad place because I'm going to go on this mission? And yet in the midst of it all, a hymn popped into his head. Do what is right. Let the consequence follow. So he did. He trained his successor as quickly as he could. And then he called the admiral's secretary and said, "I need to go see the admiral." And the secretary said, "He's not going to see you. Why do you think he's been working through a middleman all this time through the transition? He doesn't want to talk to you. He's ticked." "Well, tell him I'm coming." And Richard G. Scott tucked a Book of Mormon under his arm and went to the admiral's office, uninvited. Went in and said, "Admiral, I know you're angry. I just need you to know why I'm doing this." And he gave him a copy of the Book of Mormon and bore his testimony of its truth. By the end of the conversation, this hard-nosed military man said, "Okay, Scott, I'll read your book while you're gone. And in fact, by the time you get back, come see me. There'll be a job for you. We need you." What amazes me about that story is this is not some 75-year-old apostle. In that moment, this was a 37-year-old stake clerk. But someone the Lord had called and was qualifying. Someone the Lord knew had more important things to do and was preparing him. To see what we see in Matthew chapter 10 and realize that there are prophets, seers, and revelators in our day that read that chapter and see themselves in it in ways that you and I never will. Indeed, we thank thee, O God, for a prophet. And if we simply have the faith in God to know that he has faith in them, then we'll have the faith to follow as well.